Jerusalem. It is, without a doubt, the most revered holy city in the world. For nearly 5,000 years, it has stood as the epicenter of three of the world's major religions, with Jews, Christians, and Muslims each laying profound claim to its sacred ground. To understand the power of this place, we have to travel back to 3,500 BCE. At that time, there was nothing here. No golden domes, no towering walls, and no grand temples. Imagine only a bare limestone hill in the Judean highlands, a place of jagged rock and biting wind. The only reason humanity ever stopped here was a single strange geological accident, the Gihon Spring. This breathing spring, seeping water from a crack in the stone, was the only spark of life in an otherwise barren landscape. Yet from that humble beginning, Jerusalem became the most contested piece of dirt on the planet. The statistics of its survival are staggering. It has been completely destroyed twice, besieged 23 times, attacked 52 times, and captured and recaptured 44 times. So relentless parade of empires, Canaanite, Egyptian, Israelite, Babylonian, Persian, Greek, Roman, Byzantine, Arab, Crusader, Mamluk, Ottoman, British, and Israeli have held it, lost it, and mourned its loss. It is a place so central to global focus that the United Nations has passed more resolutions about this city than about any other place on Earth. Even its name carries a weight of deep irony. From the ancient Jerusalem to the modern City of Peace, Jerusalem has rarely known a moment of actual quiet. Instead, the name has become a longing and a promise that has fueled thousands of years of conflict. Why do we keep fighting for this ridge of limestone? Because Jerusalem isn't just a place on a map. It is a city that, against all odds, has never been allowed to die. It stands as a living testament to the fact that ideas and memories are far harder to destroy than walls. To understand why this hill became the center of the world, we have to look past the modern skyline and dig through the dust to the earliest history of Jerusalem. Our story truly begins around 3000 BC, when the first foundations of a permanent settlement were laid near the Gihon Spring. This spring was a geological miracle, a breathing source of water that allowed the first inhabitants to transform a barren and arid landscape into a cradle of civilization. By 2000 BC, the settlement, first recorded in ancient Egyptian texts under the name Jerusalem, was occupied by the Canaanites, who recognized that this water was their most precious treasure. To safeguard it, these early masters of stone hauled 5-ton boulders to construct massive 26-foot-high walls, forever cementing the city's identity as a fortress born from the need to protect the first pillar of its existence: water. But water only keeps you alive. It doesn't make a city eternal. That shift happened around 1000 BCE with a warrior king named David. When David captured the city from the Jebusites, he did something that would change history forever. He brought the Ark of the Covenant, the portable throne of God, into the city walls. He fused the political capital with the dwelling place of the divine. Suddenly, Jerusalem wasn't just where the king lived, it was where God lived. Around 970 BCE, David's successor and son, Solomon, finalized this cosmic connection by commissioning the construction of the first temple. Built upon the massive limestone outcropping at the edge of the ridge, this grand structure cemented Jerusalem's status as a major cultural and religious epicenter. It was here, within the temple's inner sanctuary, that the sacred foundation stone was enshrined, anchoring the city to what many believed was the literal center of the universe. In ancient tradition, this wasn't just a rock. It was the axis mundi, the literal turning point of the universe. It was believed to be the first piece of earth God created, and the very spot where Abraham proved his faith. For the last 3,000 years, every empire has come knocking because they wanted to stand on that stone. They realized what David and Solomon knew. If you control the water, you control the body, but if you control the stone, you control the soul. For 4 centuries, the people of Jerusalem believed their city was invincible. They had survived sieges and plagues, convinced that as long as the temple stood on that sacred rock, God would never let the walls fall. But in 586 BCE, the smoke rising from the Judean highlands told a different, darker story. The Babylonian king, Nebuchadnezzar II, had finally run out of patience. His army breached the walls, and what followed was a nightmare captured in the haunting verses of the Book of Lamentations. They didn't just loot the city, they dismantled its soul. Solomon's Temple, the white marble and gold dwelling place of the divine, was systematically burned to the ground. The sacred Ark of the Covenant vanished into the ash, never to be seen again. The survivors, the craftsmen, and the leaders were marched in chains 2,000 kilometers across the desert to the flatlands of Babylon. Imagine the sorrow of those exiles sitting by the Euphrates River, looking up at the towering blue tiles of the Ishtar Gate and realizing they were in a world that felt completely alien. By all the rules of ancient history, this should have been the end. When a city's temple was burned and its people scattered, that nation usually died. But this is where the resilience of Jerusalem becomes legendary. In the shadows of Babylon, the exiles performed one of the most astonishing cultural acts in history. They rebuilt their city out of words. Since they no longer had a physical temple, they turned to the book. Scribes began compiling the Torah in its final form, and they invented the synagogue, a way to gather for prayer that required no altar and no fixed map. This was the birth of a portable religion. Jerusalem was no longer just a place of stone and water, it was an idea they carried inside their hearts. As the sources beautifully put it, ideas cannot be burned. The tragedy of exile lasted 70 years, until a new power rose in the east. In 539 BCE, Cyrus the Great of Persia conquered Babylon and issued a decree that changed the world. He allowed the exiles to go home. This established the fourth and perhaps most powerful pillar of Jerusalem's identity, the return. By 516 BCE, exactly 7 decades after the fire, a second temple stood once again on the foundation stone. The pattern was now set for the next 2,500 years. Destruction in Jerusalem doesn't end the story. It only deepens the longing. The city had survived its first death, proving that even if you level its walls, you cannot erase its memory. By the time the Roman Empire tightened its grip on the city in 37 BCE, Jerusalem was about to undergo a physical transformation so grand it bordered on the supernatural. The man behind this was Herod the Great, a king who was as brilliant as he was paranoid. Herod didn't just want to rule Jerusalem, he wanted to overwhelm the senses of anyone who looked at it. He undertook a construction project of almost incomprehensible scale, wrapping the natural Temple Mount in massive retaining walls to create a leveled platform of 36 acres. He used stones weighing 500 tons, fitted so precisely without mortar that you couldn't slide a piece of paper between them. When the sun hit the white marble and gold of the finished temple, it could be seen from 20 miles away. Pilgrims arriving from the dusty valleys below described it as a second sunrise blazing on the horizon. In the shadow of this shimmering marble forest, a population of 70,000 to 100,000 people lived in a state of constant high-wire tension. This was the world of Jesus of Nazareth. In the very colonnades Herod built, Jesus taught and challenged the authorities of his day. His journey, the Passion, the crucifixion just outside the walls, and the belief in his resurrection transformed Jerusalem into the spiritual epicenter of a new global faith. The city wasn't just a political capital anymore. It had become the third layer of a sacred mystery, the birthplace of Christianity. But the higher the city rose in splendor, the harder it was destined to fall. The tension between Jewish rebels and Roman occupiers finally snapped in 66 CE, leading to the Roman wrath. In 70 CE, the Roman general Titus surrounded the city with his legions. The siege was brutal. Starvation was so absolute it dissolved the very boundaries of humanity. On the same calendar date the Babylonians had burned the first temple centuries earlier. The Romans set fire to the second temple. Titus razed the city so thoroughly that some contemporaries claimed a visitor wouldn't even know it had been inhabited. The only significant relic left standing was a portion of the great external retaining walls, the Western Wall. This single stretch of stone would become the focal point of Jewish longing for the next 2,000 years. The final blow to the Old World came in 132 CE. After another desperate Jewish revolt, the Emperor Hadrian decided to erase the name Jerusalem from the map entirely. He rebuilt the ruins as a Roman colony called Aelia Capitolina and erected a temple to Jupiter directly over the spot where the Jewish temple once stood. Jews were banned from entering their own city on pain of death. Hadrian thought he had finally buried the city's past under Roman paving stones, but he inadvertently made Jerusalem the most longed-for place in human history. You cannot make people forget a city by forbidding them to see it. You only make them need it more. For centuries, Jerusalem had been a city of two stories, Jewish and Christian. But in the 7th century, a third voice began to echo through its limestone valleys. To Muslims, the city became Al-Quds, the Holy, believed to be the site of the Prophet Muhammad's miraculous night journey. In 636 AD, a new kind of conqueror appeared at the gates. Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab didn't arrive with the flash of gold or the thunder of 1,000 chariots. Instead, he entered the city on foot, wearing simple, travel-worn robes and leading a single camel he had shared with his servant. When the Byzantine patriarch invited him to pray inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, Umar did something that changed the course of history. He refused. He feared that if he prayed inside, his followers would later turn the church into a mosque, stripping the Christians of their holiest site. This spirit of respect was codified in the Covenant of Umar, a landmark document that protected the city's various religions and for the first time in nearly 500 years allowed Jews to return to live and worship in their ancestral home. To mark this new era, the Umayyad Caliph Abd al-Malik completed the Dome of the Rock in 691 AD. Sitting directly atop the ancient foundation stone, its golden dome seized the skyline, visible for miles. Interestingly, its architects were Christians, and they designed the dome to match the size of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Jerusalem was becoming a unique mosaic, a city bearing the physical imprint of all three Abrahamic faiths simultaneously. However, this era of coexistence was shattered by a violent parenthesis that began in 1099 AD. When the First Crusade breached the walls, the City of Peace descended into a scene of pure horror. Unlike the peaceful surrender to Umar, this was a massacre. Historical accounts from the time, like those of William of Tyre, describe the Crusaders wading knee-deep in blood as they slaughtered Muslim and Jewish inhabitants without distinction. The Jewish community was even burned alive inside their chief synagogue. The blood-stained rule of the Crusaders lasted 88 years, until a legendary leader named Saladin arrived in 1187 AD. After his victory at the Battle of Hattin, the world braced for another massacre. But Saladin chose the path of the Caliph Umar instead. He recaptured the city with a display of incredible tolerance. He spared the churches, protected the citizens, and once again invited the exiled Jewish population to return. By the end of this era, the identity of Jerusalem was settled. It wasn't a city that belonged to any one empire or any one faith in particular. It had become a living testament to all three. Each conquest didn't replace the past. It simply added another layer of sacred stone to a hill that refused to be forgotten. For 400 years, the city fell into a deep, limestone-scented silence. Under the Ottoman Empire, starting in 1517, Jerusalem became a quiet provincial backwater. But it was during this time that the city received its most famous suit of armor. Between 1538 and 1541, Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, also known as Suleiman the Great, rebuilt the massive stone walls that still define the old city today. For 5 centuries, those walls held a fragile peace where synagogues, churches, and mosques coexisted in a silence that wasn't quite friendship, but wasn't yet war. Then came the 20th century, and with it, a storm that had been building for generations. The modern breakthrough happened on a crisp December morning in 1917. As World War I tore through the Middle East, British General Edmund Allenby captured Jerusalem from the Ottomans. In a moment of profound humility that shocked the world, Allenby refused to ride his horse through the gates. He dismounted and walked into the city through the Jaffa Gate on foot, out of respect for the holy ground. But behind this humble entrance lay a political earthquake. That same year, the Balfour Declaration pledged British support for a Jewish national home in Palestine. Suddenly, the city became the center of a collision between two powerful dreams, Zionism and Arab nationalism. It was the beginning of a riddle that remains unsolved, the struggle of two peoples, one land. The tension finally snapped in 1948. Following the end of the British Mandate and Israel's declaration of independence, war broke out, and Jerusalem was brutally cut in half. A barbed wire no-man's land ran through the heart of the city. West Jerusalem was Israeli, while the Old City, the soul of the city, fell under Jordanian control. For 19 years, the Jewish people were physically barred from the Western Wall, the last relic of their ancient temple. Then came the 1967 moment. During the Six-Day War, Israeli paratroopers fought their way through the narrow, winding lanes of the Old City. On the morning of June 7th, they reached the Western Wall. This wasn't just a military victory. It was a moment of pure ecstasy and historical shock. Soldiers who had just come from the heat of battle were seen weeping and pressing their faces against the stones. For many, this was the completion of a loop that had been open for 1,900 years since the Romans destroyed the Second Temple. It was a moment of reunification, but also one that intensified the conflict we see on the news today. Looking at the city now, we see that its history is a never-ending cycle of loss and rediscovery, of division and reunification. Jerusalem has been lost 35 times and found 35 times. Each time the city is divided or destroyed, the world's longing for it only grows deeper, proving that while walls can be built and torn down, the memory of this city is something no empire can ever truly conquer. As the sun sets over the Judean highlands, the limestone walls of the old city begin to glow, shifting from amber to a deep, burning gold. If you stand there at this hour, you'll hear a soundscape that exists nowhere else on earth. The bells of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the melodic call of the muezzin from a dozen minarets, and the rhythmic Hebrew prayers rising from the western wall. These sounds don't just echo in the air, they echo through time. Beneath the feet of every tourist and pilgrim lies one of the most incredible physical files of human history. In just 1 square kilometer, 35 centuries of civilization are compressed into 30 meters of archaeological stratigraphy. To find the city's beginning, you have to dig through layers of Ottoman masonry, Crusader rubble, Byzantine mosaics, and Roman columns, past Herodian ashlar and Babylonian debris, until you finally reach the bare limestone above the Gihon Spring. Every single empire that stood on this ground was absolutely certain they were the ultimate heir to this hill. Every one of them was wrong. The city simply outlasted them all. This reveals the great paradox. Destruction is how Jerusalem works. It is the very mechanism of its survival. Every time the city was plowed, burned, or had its name erased from the map, its sacred weight only increased. The Babylonian exile turned a local faith into a portable one. The Roman destruction turned a physical city into a global longing. And 19 years of division in the 20th century only made the Western Wall more sacred to those barred from it. Ultimately, Jerusalem's life is sustained by 4 eternal elements that no conqueror can steal and no exile can extinguish: water, stone, memory, and hope. Jerusalem has been lost 35 times and found 35 times. This stubborn, beautiful insistence that this particular hill matters more than survival or reason is perhaps the best definition we have of what it means to be human. Jerusalem remains a living testament to our shared heritage, a place where the argument continues, the spring still flows, and the story never truly ends. Thank you for walking through these 5 millennia with us. We'll see you in the next era.